Good morning, everyone. I'm joined here by a good friend of mine from years past who I haven't caught up with in a while. And I'm here to talk to you today about Ronald Abdow. He is the entrepreneur from the 20th century that I want to talk to you about, who thrived in the post-war world. The family actually had an entrepreneurial background before that. His grandfather was from Lebanon and came here in 1890, where he operated a gas station in a mini golf that featured a live bear in a cage as one of the hazards. That must have been a heck of a course. Ron would go to Brown, where he played football, earned his degree, came back, and the family at the time was running a scrap metal business. But they initially, he and his brother had this vision of taking their 10 to 11 person company and expanding it. But fluctuations in the economy really hit scrap metal hard. In fact, during recessions, the price would go down so low that it would really hurt them. And it would take a long time for the price to get back up to where it was in the boom times. And so as a commodity, it posed some real challenges. So they were looking for an opportunity to get into a business that had really good growth potential. Now, at this time in the American economy, we were no longer enjoying those halcyon days of the free market where entrepreneurs could rise on their own and really statistically grow. The Small Business Association talks about 4% of all businesses tending to fail. But there was a caveat to that. There was a unique opportunity to reduce the risk and improve the odds to about 63% or so. And that was something called franchising. And so franchising was really the last hope for a lot of entrepreneurs to be able to compete in a marketplace that was now cartelized, that had now caught kind of the British disease of over association, over organization, and controls that kind of entrenched and economic powers in particular fields, in particular industries, and made it harder for newcomers to enter in, and sometimes had some very prohibitive ways to prevent them from growing. And so franchising provided an opportunity to band together with an already established business that was proving successful, to build on those proven methods, and to be a part of a larger association. And so enter their cousin Eli, who was in the Washington, D.C., Maryland area and had had some success with drive-in restaurants. His was called Speedy's, and looks a little bit like the guy over my shoulder here. And the growth of the highways was really making food a growth industry after the Interstate Highway Act under Eisenhower. And eating out had transformed from being something that was really reserved for just the affluent and well-to-do to something that now was becoming a leisure activity, becoming kind of a family activity, and something that was in demand. So in 1959, they actually, their cousin Eli had found great success in particular with his Highboy franchise, which was in the Washington and Maryland area, and he was looking to franchise it. It also bore a very similar look and menu to the gentleman behind me. And so they were from Worcester, but Eli, cousin Eli, was awarding the Worcester market to his sister. And so they couldn't compete there. So they picked the Springfield area. And they were familiar with the area because oftentimes they brought scrap metal to the smelters located over in West Springfield. There was a site they were aware of that had a history of failure. It was sort of a summer shack kind of location, and it just, nothing that went in there ever succeeded. They recognized that the problem was that they were only open in the summer. So by operating year round, they were able to be successful. Now then, a chance meeting with the Elias brothers, when brother George went to Michigan to meet with them, turned out they had the same priest, because the priest they had in their area had been transferred to Michigan. And he told the Elias brothers to do something to get George and Ron a big boy franchise for the Massachusetts area. And they did. So in some ways it was divine providence. And so they met with Bob Wian, and Bob liked them. And Bob had grown the Big Boy franchise, and a lot of it came down to the burger that is right over my head. Bob one day was working at his Bob's Pantry when a jazz musician came in who had been performing at the local hotel and asked for something different. And so Bob came up with something different, featuring, as you can see, a roll, but it was a roll that was not cut in half, but was instead cut in thirds. Let's see if I can get that. You're gonna have to, let me just tell you that the job I did cutting this roll ensures that I will never actually work in an Abdow, but you can see there's 3 pieces there. Well, not that that's an option for me career-wise these days anyway, but they were still around maybe then. But that innovative bun, then you would put cheese and meat between the top and the bottom, with the middle kind of providing some stability, and it became a very dynamic, popular sandwich. But Bob actually needed them as much as they needed him, because he needed to protect this Big Boy trademark, which we'd already proven with his cousin Eli was already under attack. And it was really hard to defend a trademark nationally when you were only operating your restaurants like Bob was in Southern California. So they rebranded as Big Boys in 1963. And then friendship actually allowed for them to open up breakfast and salad bars, because the Shoney's, who were then operating Big Boys themselves, shared with them the model. They were able to gain a corner on the market for family dining in the Massachusetts, Western Massachusetts and Central Massachusetts area, which allowed them to have great success. Ron would actually be an official in his spare time and would officiate the Orange Bowl National Championship game between Jimmy Johnson and Barry Switzer, Miami and Oklahoma, respectively. And Jimmy Johnson lost his composure on the sideline when Ron made a call against them, but a year later ran into Ron and told him, "Ron, you're right." Jimmy Johnson had, and probably still has, a little bit of a temper. So at their peak, they had 19 Big Boys and 4 separate concept dining houses. And each Big Boy at that time was bringing in about $1.5 million a year gross. And a lot of it's centered around their motto of serve hot food hot and cold food cold. Unlike McDonald's, they did not have a unified national franchise network working with them, and they suffered some balkanization. After Bob Wian left, Bob Wian had provided such great training, such great research and development, so much support for the franchisees. The ones who came after them were just pale comparisons and didn't really know what they were doing with the national direction. And so for the first time in the 90s, the brothers Abdow faced the onset of national franchises entering the region. And they had built their business model, not on sub-franchising, not on servicing a pyramid scheme so that they could grow their local brand larger and larger, but rather to concentrate on those efforts instead on providing great meals, which is why they were the top seller per store within the Big Y family. However, when we look at problems with how GDP is some of our reading from this week focused on, one of the things we see is that it doesn't take into account things like poverty and other things. And that was really becoming a regional issue. And so they were coming to a point where their restaurants needed to be completely renovated. They had gotten dated, and there's a lifespan to a decor. And they hesitated because the amount of expense that would go into it was really something that gave them pause. The restaurant business was changing regionally. They were getting older. There was no succession plan because they had always stayed a small local company. They hadn't built the corporate structures to allow them to kind of weather competition from corporate chains. The area was struggling. There was a really bad recession that hit earlier, deeper, and lasted longer in this area than the rest of the nation. And so they sold out to the Bickford's chain, and they were probably prescient because the national franchisor for Big Boy actually filed Chapter 11 and only sold for $50 million to the successor, who would create Big Boy International, former radio station owner. And the Bigford's chain that had bought them would end up suffering extreme losses in the decades to follow, and now only operates 2 restaurants when they've been closer to 40 to 70. And none of those 2 remaining restaurants were actually a part of the sale. So they obviously read the writing on the wall. So they'd always built their restaurants with an eye on real estate. They wanted to own the real estate. And this provided them a different business model after they sold off the stores and the last dining houses had closed on their own due to, in one case, they lost their parking lot. In another, it was the Great Recession and they needed a new business model, new menu concept, and they just didn't want to put the time into it. So instead, they managed the real estate until very recently, they began to get out of that as well, as Ron, now 89 years of age, is getting into retirement, and their legacy lives on in the memories of those family and all the staff who to this day still work in the region, having been benefited from the amazing training that Ron and Bob Wian's restaurant provided. And I just wanted to show you a quick photo. This is Ron here with his wife, and I think you're familiar with the gentleman on their left. And thank you, and I enjoyed talking to you about Ron Abdow. Had the opportunity to meet with him for an hour and with his son Steve for another hour, and it was really a bucket list item for me to be able to do this story. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing your videos, and I'm actually sorry to see this class end. I'm looking forward to not having any more assignments because I'm kind of burnt out a little bit, but I am going to miss being with you guys in this class. It's been a great class, and best luck in the coming semester, which unfortunately starts Monday.